Good afternoon, everyone. So, dear faculty, students, and my colleagues, very warm welcome to the public lecture series number 3, organized by the GSHS School of Humanities and Social Sciences today. So, we are very privileged and delighted to have Professor V. Sridhar to speak on the topic economics of privacy on this occasion. Also, we are equally delighted and privileged to have Dr. Usha Ramanathan to chair today's lecture. So now I would like to request Professor Nagendra Rao, the Director of GSHS School of Humanities and Social Sciences, to address the gathering.
Welcome, Professor Sridhar, Dr.Usha, to our School of Humanities and Social Sciences. This is a very, recently established school in Hyderabad campus of GITAM University. Primarily, GITAM University is located in Visakhapatnam, but they had a campus in Hyderabad as well. And our school is 2 years old. In the last 6 months, we are conducting a series of the lectures on issues which are relevant to the people in general and particularly to the younger generation, because they are the ones who are going to carry these issues to their future, and they need to secure their future in a better way with all dimensions, not only with their education, but the way where they are pursuing their education as well. So in that process, now what is happening with the technologies around, because I, being a political science student, was groomed in a phrase of Aristotle, that is, man is a social animal. But we know now that primarily we need to change that phrase of man is a social animal to humans are digital animals. So more and more time we are spending on digital technologies. One way or the other, we are getting influenced by the influence of these technologies in our lives in more than the ways we actually understand. Because there are multitude of issues, probably we would not understand how this technology is affecting us. Because we see in terms of the privacy, but the technology intervention is more than the privacy. And we know recently, for the last, I think, 10 years, how the entire political discourse or election campaign and the entire the power scenario is influenced by those who are using effectively the digital technologies. In this context, what I felt was now we need to have a someone who is eminent to speak on these matters to enlighten us. Recently, I'm reading Professor Sridhar for a long time. I think probably he might not know that there are many people who are following him and his writings across the platforms related to issues of the big technology and the technologies intervention in our lives. When I read his article, I think 15 days before in Hindu, immediately that is the time. Earlier, I'm not in a position to invite him to the places wherever I want, but at least now I'm in a position to invite him. Immediately, I wrote my gratitude for enlightening us on these matters, and I also requested him to deliver the lecture in our school, because these are the issues which are concerned not only the people of the technology or high-tech people. This is also an issue concerned to the humanities and social sciences students. And fortunately, my colleagues also brought in another person who is working for a long time, championing the intervention of the digital technologies on ordinary lives, particularly other related activities. That is Dr.Usha Ramanathan. I think not only are the related one, she is the one who is championing many causes, including labor laws and environmental laws as well, consistently pursuing the academic activity with the activism, which is to influence all our lives. So I am really thankful for both these eminent people to visit our school and enlightening us, since there are two people who are much more learned. I think this is the time I request and I leave the platform to both the eminent people to enlighten us. Thank you. Thank you very much. Manda?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Professor Narendra. Let me also introduce you today's speaker, Dr. V. Sridhar. So, Professor V. Sridhar is a full-time professor at the Center for Information Technology and Public Policy at the International Institute of Information Technology, Bangalore. He is the author of a number of books, namely The Telecom Revolution in India, Technology, Regulation and Policy, which was published in 2012, and The Dynamics of Spectrum Management, Legacy, Technology and Economics, published in 2014. His third book, which is titled Emerging ICT Policy and Regulation, Roadmap to Digital Economy, was published in 2019 by Springer Nature. He is currently editing another book titled Data-Centric Living, Algorithms, Digitization and Regulation, which will be published by Routledge. So Professor Sridhar has taught at many institutions in the USA, Finland, New Zealand, and of course India. He has received funding from various sources, both national and international, for his research projects. So the recent one of them include funding from Facebook and Azim Premji University Research Foundation. He has been a member of Government of India Committee on Telecom and IT and has published many peer-reviewed articles in Telecom and Information Systems Journal. Dr. Sridhar has a PhD from the University of Iowa, USA. His research interests include techno-economics of network, telecommunications, internet policy and regulation, radio spectrum policy, distributed software project management, platform economics, and agent-based modeling, to name a few. He has also received a number of awards and honors, which include the 4th Annual Excellence in Research Journal Award 2010 by IGI Global for the best research article titled Challenges of Information Security Management in an R&D Services Company, the Case of Wireless Comms Software, the Journal of Cases in Information Technology. Other than these, he has been also awarded the Excellence in Research by Management Development Institute, Gurgaon, in 2007-2008. He was also the Nokia Visiting Fellow from Nokia Research Foundation, which was hosted him in Networking Lab, Helsinki University of Technology, Finland, in 2007. And he also has received Best Faculty Award from the Indian Institute of Management, Lucknow, in 2001. Dr. Sridhar also teaches for both the undergraduate and postgraduate programs at IIT Bangalore. He is a prolific writer and his articles regularly appear in the TV. So a very warm welcome to you, Professor Sridhar. Thank you very much. Now let me also introduce our the chair of today's public lecture, Dr. Usha Ramanathan. So Dr. Usha Ramanathan works on the jurisprudence of law of our rights. She writes and speaks on issues that include the nature of law, Bhopal gas disaster, mass displacement, manual scavenging, civil liberties, including the death penalty, beggary, criminal law, custodial institutions, the environment, judicial process, to name a few. She has been tracking and engaging with the Indian National ID project and has written and debated extensively on that subject. She has been writing and debating issues of technology and the human conditions of freedom and liberty over the years. Her work draws heavily upon the non-governmental experience, and she has also a 6-year stint as a reporter with a law journal named Supreme Court Cases from the Supreme Court, and she has been engaged with matters of public policy over the past year. She has been a regular speaker at various universities, and she is often called upon by the National Judicial Academy in Bhopal and the Delhi Judicial Academy to address judges on various issues pertaining to law and poverty and on technology and the law. She has also served as a member on various expert group and committees including expert group on privacy set up in the Planning Commission of India, which submitted its report in 2012. She was also a member of the committee set up in the Department of Biotechnology to review the draft human DNA profiling bill 2012. She was a member of the committee set up by the Prime Minister's office to study the socio-economic status of tribal communities in 2013-14. She has been a member of such eminent groups and committees of the Government of India. She was also awarded Access Now's Human Rights Heroes Award in 2019. So once again, a very warm welcome to Dr. Usha Ramanathan, and thank you very much for appearing to this session, ma'am. So I would like to request Dr. Usha Ramanathan to brief the audience on the importance of the topic. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Kulkarni. I'm delighted to have had this opportunity to listen, and I wouldn't have known about this meeting if you hadn't invited me to chair it. So I had to say yes because I want to hear Dr. Sridhar. So it really left me no choice. The reason I wanted to want to hear him, of course, I want to hear him even otherwise, but when he's speaking as a person who's conversant with technology on questions of privacy, it's among the most important questions that's floating around in our midst these days. And that's partly, as we know, because the sudden expansion of privacy, of technology into all manner of spheres, its proliferation everywhere, but its concentration of control of all that technology will allow to happen, and all that is produced by technology, all of this being in a few hands, is one reason that all of us need to be concerned about this. I also think it's significant that when we are talking about the economics of privacy, to consider the other aspect of privacy, economics, which is that there has been a shift in the past 20, 25 years where among the 10 richest companies and the 10 richest people in the world, we find that it's getting overtaken in a huge way by persons in technology and technology companies. It's not an accident. And it is happening at a time when we are being told that we are getting everything for free. I mean, I'm not paying anything to be on this call. So how, when everything is free, are these people becoming so rich? And how are these companies becoming so rich? And I haven't seen a sufficient explanation of this. Of course, we all have, everyone says advertising. I'm not honestly completely convinced that advertising produces all of this and that it's only advertising that they are banking on. I think Cambridge Analytica told us that that's not quite true, and that there are all manner of sharing, transacting that happens in the context of technology, which is to do with economics, but which can only be done at the cost of something like privacy. Also, in the years of work that some of us have been doing, we know that privacy doesn't just mean that you don't know about me, or my neighbor doesn't know what I'm doing, or I don't know what my neighbor has had for lunch today. It is actually about privacy as personal security. It is about changing relationship between state and people. It is about collaborative efforts between states and companies and business interest. It is about business interests saying that privacy is a hindrance to the development that they can bring to our polity. So these are really, really significant questions. And so I'm really interested to hear what Dr. Sridhar will have to say on this. Just a few points on this. The first is that I think in India, especially, we need to acknowledge that the importance of privacy in the context of technology and the possibility that privacy cannot survive this kind of proliferation of this kind of use of technology and this kind of proliferation of technology became clear when in the UID case, which is otherwise called the Aadhaar case, the government went, the Attorney General stood up in court and said, people of this country don't have a right to privacy. And it's truly significant that 9 judges of the Supreme Court sat and in among the most important decisions that in recent times, not just asserted that privacy is a fundamental right, but said that it is an inherent right It is not a right that has been given to us, which can be taken away. It is an innate right, and that other rights will suffer if we don't have the right to privacy. So it's a very, very strong judgment, and it came after recognizing that informational privacy is one of those things which is an emerging area. But the fact that the government and the UIDAI went to court and said that privacy is not a right at all is so significant that we need to test everything that has happened since on whether what has happened since could survive the test of privacy. And a lot of it we find it can't survive that test. The second thing is that, in Indian constitutional law, we have a thing where we say that you can't waive a fundamental right. I have the right to free speech and expression. I may not use it, but I can't say, okay, I'm giving it up. I don't want it. You can do what you want with it. It is a right that I have, whether I exercise it or not. Privacy is such a right, so it can't be waived. We are seeing technologies and technology controllers collaborating with states are waiving them on our behalf. They're saying, let's bring in various kinds of projects, whether it is done through mandatoriness or it's, the different systems that may be put in place are still saying that somebody wants to waive it on our behalf. That plainly is not within a constitutional framework. The third is this idea of datafication, where increasingly, in fact, I was very interested, sir, when I heard you say humans are digital animals. And I was thinking, if there is one thing we have shown, it is that we are not animals at all, because animals have a certain rationality, which as human beings, we seem to be losing. Whether it's climate change or it's technology, we hurtle towards disaster all the time and have no clue how to deal with it after that. So animals, on the other hand, seem to know how to manage nature and their place in nature. And to be a digital animal to me is something I personally can tell you that if there's one thing I don't intend being, I may use the digital, but we become digital animals when we let the digital become the master and we are the slaves to that digital technology. And that's something that we need to guard against. It's a good caution at a time like now. The fourth is this idea that whatever privacy we have it so that we can contribute to the public good. So it is not an individual right. We have a right. After the privacy judgment was impossible for anyone to deny that we don't have the right. So they said, okay, you have it. But you have it so that you can contribute to the common good. And what is that good? That good is building up an economy. So if, we've lost our ability to deal with most other resources, and the use of most other resources has resulted in our climate change crisis today. So now we are looking for a human crisis where we use biometrics, where we use personally identifiable information. We use DNA. We use all of this to create another economy. Just to give you one illustration, the document with us that India will soon have the largest amount of data and on health, and it's going to help build our economy within that. And just a couple of things. One, I'm sure Dr. Sridhar will give us. I shouldn't say I'm sure. I'm not sure, but I'm hoping that you will give us something on how you view the non-personal data framework. This idea that there are some things which are non-personal, which are actually personal. This complete, perversion of language. And I'll end with this, that some of us have now been looking for an altered imagination on technology. What we are finding is that the excitement of technology that existed in the first decade of this century has now become anxiety. And every time we go ahead and use it anyway, we use it by quelling our anxiety and suppressing it, not because anxiety has actually disappeared. So if there is some pointers you could give us for an altered imagination, that would really be exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ramanathan. And thank you very much for your succinct remarks and highlighting the importance of privacy from various facets, whether it is social, economic, political, cultural. And now I would like to request our speaker, Dr. Sridhar, without further delay, to give us a lecture.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Madhar. Thank you, Professor Nagendra, for inviting me to give this particular lecture. And thanks to GITAM University for inviting me. Usha Ramanathan has given a very good framework for me to start with. I cannot compete with her because she has given an excellent overview of the legal aspects of privacy. So what I would like to do, I mean, since most of the audience also will include, I presumably, students, I have made it lighter. Okay, so anyway, there are theoretical questions that we need to answer with respect to privacy, and I completely concur with Ms. Usha Ramanathan on her views on privacy, the Justice Krishna report. I am also part of a group of volunteers who are trying to shed some light into the non-personal data in PD. We have had a number of webinars in that area as well. So let me start. Economics of privacy. Sorry. So as Usha Ramanathan pointed out earlier, there have been a number of instances that have happened in the recent times. Of course, to start with Cambridge Analytica. In fact, Mantar mentioned about me getting funding from Facebook, so I should not be saying that. But anyway, so Cambridge Analytica was the one which started the whole aspects of privacy, which resulted in the general data protection regulation in the US the EU to be enacted. I will not go into the details, but anyway, so they might have read in the newspapers about, for example, TikTok ban. I'm sure that they're all aware of it. Somebody must be, active users as well as producers on the TikTok, and the government recently banned it. Though it was banned as one of the Chinese apps, there are a lot of reasons why, for example, the government banned it, including, storing of the information without the producers and the users' consent, and then using it in an inappropriate way. So there are a lot of reasons why, for example, these instances have happened. There have been recently, I'm sure that all of your students use WhatsApp, right? And WhatsApp changed its privacy policy recently. And therefore, there has been some contentions, and therefore WhatsApp recently, Facebook, which owns WhatsApp, has retracted the changes to the privacy policy recently, and then probably they will relook at it. So there are a lot of things. For example, Zoom was also in a problem because in the earlier times, the COVID times when COVID was at peak, everyone was using Zoom, and it was found out that actually when we make this kind of video conferences, Zoom said in its privacy policy that it is storing all the information in the servers located in the US, but in fact, it was found out by one of the hackers that the session conversations are being stored in servers in China. So that became a big issue. So, so these are some of the instances which have evoked interest, especially in India. WhatsApp, as most of you will be using WhatsApp, and you will be using, I'm sure that all of you kids, and my daughter also uses Google Pay all the time. She doesn't carry cash, and I'm sure that you are using Google Pay. You might also start using WhatsApp Pay, because WhatsApp Pay has been approved by the Reserve Bank of India recently. But there are concerns because Facebook owns WhatsApp, and what happens if the payment data, for example, if you have transferred some money to someone else, is it possible that it can be leaked to Facebook, and Facebook can share it with others? It can be, visible to others in your profile or something like that. So there has been some recently, there have been questions about WhatsApp being able to provide payment services and ability to share the data with Facebook. So those are all concerns, and not only WhatsApp and Google, the big tech in general, as Ms. Usha Ramanathan has correctly pointed out, Amazon, Apple, Google, and Facebook, they all have been taken for antitrust in the US by the Federal Trade Commission. So, Amazon founder, CEO, ex-founder, because he just stepped down a couple of days back, Jeff Bezos announced that he cannot guarantee the company employees have access to third-party seller data. For example, Amazon sells a lot of products from sellers, and it has been questioned, whether Amazon uses or Amazon's employees use the personal data of the sellers in an inappropriate way. So all these are happening. There are also many instances. I think Mr. Ramanathan pointed out a very important aspect of biometrics and Aadhaar, right? So what happens if your biometrics is stolen, right? So your whole identity is stolen. You are faceless, right? So these are all problems. And though, for example, the government keeps coming back with statements saying that Aadhaar biometric database is 100% secure, and your identity information, especially your biometric information, can never be hacked. There is no guarantee, right? So you see every day in the newspaper that some personal information has been leaked, has been stolen, has been hacked. So hackers are well ahead of these information technology companies, right? So there's bound to be some hacking somewhere, and it is possible that even the very strong encrypted, secure biometric database of Aadhaar can also be leaked sometime or the other. So what are the implications? And we'll discuss it a little bit more. You've been hearing this, for example, Ms. Usha Ramanathan also pointed out, largest ID database, it was exposed some time back. In fact, I think Uttar Pradesh, one of the municipal corporation website had the Aadhaar number, the name, address, phone number, and everything was posted along with the water bill, like on the notice board or something like that. So those are all problems. Not only are private companies, I have given the example of Facebook and Amazon. So governments have also been using personal information, and they have a sovereign right to use it. That's what they say. For example, China, this is very, very important. You should see actually this particular video. There is a BBC reporter who said that, I will just vanish in Shanghai and you will never be able to find out. Within 7 minutes, the China's CCTV surveillance network was able to spot this guy in a street corner, and he was captured. So which means that the CCTV, China is one of the countries which have the maximum number of CCTVs. Of course, London also has a lot of CCTVs, though they say that it is for traffic, management, and so on. But these CCTVs are very powerful. They can actually identify the person using face recognition and things like that. And this CCTV surveillance network was able to capture this particular reporter within about 7 minutes. You should see the YouTube video. It is amazing. And the Chinese premier has been, credited with creating a social credit system where the governments will monitor and control each and every movement of the citizens. You know that if you, for example, if anyone does a mistake in China, their social credit goes down. For example, if you, recently there was a news saying that, somebody plucked a flower in the park, in the public park, and the social credit system degraded this particular individual's credit, and that the individual was not able to admit, his daughter to school. He was not able to get a job because social credit system in China is very powerful. And it is much more like, academic record. And if you don't have a good social credit, then it is not possible for you to progress in life, right? So that's scary. That's really scary. This is state surveillance, right? So the technologies also help it quite a bit, right? So for example, this particular cartoon says it all, right? So everybody, if you wanted to snoop on people's most intimate information, become an app developer. You develop a mobile app, and which is really cool, and everyone will download it, and everyone will say, oh, I consent to this particular mobile app to access all the information in my phone, and that's it, right? So this is the way in which we, most of the times we accept, right? Without even reading through it, we consent, we give a consent. And once this is done, then all your digital footprints, which are present within that particular phone, including the transactions that you have made, the website that you visited, the places that you have been, all those things are visible to that particular app, right? So technology is enabled this to go into any extremes. Of course, the other side of it is that there can be a lot of privacy paranoids. I am not really a privacy paranoid, but a lot of my faculty colleagues are privacy paranoid. And this cartoon illustrates this, right? So the boss is so much worried about information security that he sends his message one alphabet at a time in random sequence, right? He's so paranoid about privacy that he wants to hide everything, even the message that he is sending, because he thinks that somebody will snoop it, right? And therefore, he is trying to make things really hard for his secretary, right? Because he's not able to cope up with it. So this is the other dimension, how users view, for example, these kind of surveillance. And at one stage, there are extreme positions that you can take, including being paranoid of each and everything that one does. For example, I can be paranoid about this particular Zoom call. It is quite possible that somebody will be hacking onto this and then use that information of 143 people in this participating in this particular Zoom call in order to do something else later. The important thing is information is not perishable, right? So information has time value, and therefore you need not use it today, but you can use it after 30 years. It's possible, right? And therefore, these are all some consequences of privacy. But in fact, the theoretical question that begs is, what is privacy, right? So I think Mr. Usha Ramanathan gives an excellent overview of privacy. But I would suggest, as students, you should really go through this particular paper, a taxonomy of privacy, which was written a long time back, 2006, much before we talked about privacy, right? And I really admire this guy called Professor Daniel Soloway at George Washington University, who gave a taxonomy of privacy, right? What is privacy? And I won't go into the details, but I will be using some of his taxonomy. He came up with 16 attributes, right? And then we'll discuss a little bit of that later on. You can actually pick an instance of violation of privacy, and you can always match it to one of the 16 attributes. That's the beauty of this particular taxonomy. I really urge you, this particular paper, you can just get the Google Scholar to search for it. It is available as an open, open paper, open access paper, and you should review it. I mean, it has about 50 or 60 pages, but you should read through it. You will thoroughly enjoy it. Now, what is privacy anyway? A lot of people, it started Warren Brandeis in 1890. People have been talking about privacy for a very long time, even though we are not very much aware of it. In fact, when I started teaching my course on privacy in digital age, I was amazed by the literature that is around privacy. Right? For example, it started in 1819. The aspect of human dignity and inviolate personality was proposed by Glowstone in 1964. Information privacy came into existence long back in 1967 by Weston, right? We are talking about today, it's about 80, 90 years later. So Soloway's taxonomy also stands good, right? Basically, I will just take you through the taxonomy. I'm not going to present and go through it in full, but in general, if you look at the stages of information processing, when an individual is, as a data subject, is involved in transaction with the data fiduciary, such as, for example, Google or Facebook, there are basically 3 stages, right? So, for example, there is some data collection. I mean, as Ms. Usha Ramanathan has correctly pointed out, when you type a Google search, that Google search has been collected already, right? Once you hit the return, it is collected by Google. I mean, the Google also collects maybe a lot more things, for example, where your cursor is on the screen and what your profile is, because as soon as you log into Google Chrome, and if you have been a Gmail user, your picture shows up on the top right-hand side, right? Because it already knows that you are the one who is browsing it, right? It has a lot of information which is collected so far. So that is the collection stage. Then the second stage is processing. Once the information is collected, then it is processed. It is processed. Once you do the Google search, for example, shoes, then you see a lot of advertisements coming up. How? Because Google knows that you have used a search term called shoes, and from your profile and from the previous browsings that you have done so far, it knows approximately who you are, right? And then figure out that these may be the shoes that you're looking at the nearby shoe store. It also knows where you are located, and it shows the advertisements of the shoe stores nearby, right? So it's a lot of processing. And these shoe store, for example, Liberty or Bata showroom that are shown nearby, pay to Google. And, there are a lot of, I teach in one of my courses a techno-economics of these particular aspects. In fact, Google uses generalized second price auction, a very complicated auction process in order to allocate the ad space to, for example, the different data fiduciaries, right? For example, if Bata showroom shows first, then they have paid a lot of money to Google in order to secure that space compared to the Liberty showroom, which has showed up as the second item in the advertisement bar. Right? So it uses a very complicated generalized auction process to do that. But we know that once you do this, you know that Google has shared the information about you, that you have selected, shoes to be, that you have searched for shoes to Bata, and therefore Bata is showing the advertisement. Right? So there is a lot of processing which has taken place, and the information gets leaked to third parties or whatever it is, and it have been identified. A lot of information have been aggregated. It has figured out, right? For example, you are in this particular area and you want the shoes, and probably you bought shoes from Amazon earlier and your shoe size is 11. So it has put all these information together, and the Bata advertisement comes up exactly showing the, more or less the shoes that you want. In fact, on one hand, I admire Google, right? Because when you type something, it exactly thinks like you, because it knows so much about you that it can actually think like you, right? So that's processing. And the last one is dissemination, right? Once the information is collected, it is possible that it can be disclosed to the public, much like the Aadhaar card case, right? Or it can be used to blackmail you, because the data fiduciary or the data company which has collected information about you has a lot of, for example, health information. If it has a lot of health information, it is possible that it can be used to blackmail you, to induce you to buy a certain insurance products and things like that. Or it can be distorted and posted somewhere. So all these things are possible. And this dissemination phase also, there are a lot of privacy breaches which can happen. So in general, when the information is collected, processed, and disseminated, privacy breaches are possible, right? Privacy breaches are possible. Now, we can look at the economics of privacy. Of course, Ms. Usha Ramanathan is an expert in legal recourse, legal frameworks, and she has studied quite a bit about the legal aspects of privacy. And we have also had, for example, landmark judgments, right? And also personal data protection bill and the expert committee looking at non-personal data and so on. But I would like to touch a little bit on economics of privacy. Why do companies do that? Why do we allow the companies to do that, right? And that is one thing that I want to discuss a little bit. So the first thing that I will do is online price discrimination. Now, all these things are not mine, right? I borrow quite a bit from the scholars. So, for example, I really admire this guy. You should look at his website, Alexandro Acquisti at Carnegie Mellon University. He has studied privacy economics in detail, right? And he's an expert in privacy economics. Of course, Hal Varian at UC Berkeley. Hal Varian was an advisor to Google on, for example, designing the generalized second price auction for advertisements. In fact, he is responsible for the Google AdWords, and also the, contributed quite a bit to Google's revenue in advertisements. But he's a landmark economist, and then his contribution, to, for example, the generalized second price auction, which is used for online advertising, is landmark. And of course, Rose Anderson at University of Cambridge, who looked at security economics for quite some time. Ken Lawden at New York University, who basically proposed the whole marketplace, the data marketplace, about which I will discuss a little bit later, and so on and so on, right? So I attribute all the credits on information economics to these scholars. So this is very, very quite involved slide, but basically, I will just talk about the left side, to my left, right, to your left also, the economics of privacy. The second one is information security economics, right? For example, why do breaches happen? Why do information gets leaked out? That's the whole aspect of information security economics, about which I will not talk today, but I will talk about this particular left side, right? Consumer identification, data intermediaries and secondary markets, marketing, and voluntary disclosures. These are the four things that I will briefly discuss about the economics of privacy. So the first one, it's all about economics. Privacy is about trade-offs, right? There's a pros and cons of revealing access to personal information. As Ms. Usha Ramanathan has correctly pointed out, when I do a Google search and Google is free, and Google Mail, Gmail is free, Facebook is free, it is not free, right? You are revealing a lot of personal information, and that's the trade-off that you are making, right? You trade off your personal information for the free service that they seem to provide. It is not free, right? Nothing in this world is free. If somebody says you that, oh, I'm going to give it this for free, no, right? They are expecting something back. So in general, privacy is always about trade-offs between for the data subjects and also for the companies that gather personal information from you, right? It's an economic problem. It's a legal problem. It is social problem, but it's also an economic problem, right? When the entities involved may not be aware that they are in fact accepting the trade-off. For example, do you know that when you are doing a search, right? What is the trade-off that you are making, right? Are you able to really judge that this information that I'm going to share with the other party, that is Google, is worth this much? Are you able to conceptualize that? It's so difficult, right? It's not like a biscuit packet which costs 10 rupees, right? I know that if I have 20 rupees, I'll go and buy Amul chocolate. But I know the worth of Amul chocolate. But if somebody asks you, I will give you 100 rupees, what is the personal information that you will sell me? It is absolutely, we cannot come up with any answer, right? So it is very, very difficult to estimate the value of your personal information. Now, I think Ms. Usha Ramanathan gave a somewhat view of this public, non-personal data, right? So you have a private sphere and you have a public sphere. For example, all of us on Facebook, I'm not a fan of Facebook. I really don't know how to use that. My daughter is always there in Facebook. But I use LinkedIn. I use some other, I have my own website, www.vsridhar.info. So I put in certain information as a public information, right? I don't mind putting it. For example, if you want to ask me tomorrow, I might say that, I gave this particular lecture at GITAM University. I might put it in my website, right? That's a public information. But I also have a lot of private information, which I want to secure as a data subject. Right now, the difference, the intersection between private and public is very, very ambiguous. Right. So, for example, that is one of the reasons why, for example, a lot of people on Facebook put private information in the public domain, and it goes scot-free. Right. So we need to be able to judge and come back with a method of defining what is private and what is public, especially in the social media networks, and that's often very, very difficult. The second important thing that I have mentioned here at the top is the information asymmetry, right? That is also, I mentioned it earlier, when you as a data subject give out some information to companies like Google or Facebook or Amazon, you really don't know exactly how they are going to use it. There is absolutely asymmetric information between you and the data fiduciary or the data company, right? So you can always look at the privacy policy of this particular company. Have you ever looked at it? No. The reason is we don't know. We are rational human beings, right? And I will discuss a little bit about hyperbolic discounting later on. But in general, there is a huge information asymmetry when we deal with information sharing to a particular data fiduciary or a data company such as Google or Facebook. We really don't know how they're going to use it. And therefore, it is very, very difficult to put a check as to whether this is the information that I want to share and this is the information that I don't want to share, right? And there is uncertain preferences. The preferences of me declaring something as a private information and something as a public information may be totally different from what Professor Mandar thinks about his private information and his public information, right? So there is uncertain preferences between private and public information. So the study of privacy economics is always to find out the incentives and the trade-offs that emerge from the public and the private sphere. It's often very difficult, unsolved problems, even by economists, mathematicians, sociologists, and lawyers, right? Now, it's also, we're also trying to study, whether these sharing of information can be defined through markets. Is it possible? For example, markets have been in existence for a very long time, right? And the markets have worked to some extent beautifully in most of the goods and services, right? So, for example, I know that I will go to Kirana store and buy 10 rupees, worth of, Parle glucose biscuit, and Parle, cannot actually charge me for 15 rupees because then I won't buy it. There are alternatives for Parle, and therefore I will choose to buy it at the price that I'm willing to pay, right? So the markets have worked quite well. Is it possible that we can define something called a data market? Or should it be regulated? Should it be self-regulated? That is, you and I regulated by ourselves, Or should it be regulated through technologies, right? So a lot of new technologies have come up, privacy enhancing technologies, right? So there are people who are always, it's not that people are not thinking about privacy. So they've always been trying to find out new ways of protecting privacy. So privacy enhancing technologies have come. Are there a way by which we can use technologies in order to control the trade-offs between the private and public sphere, or through legislation, right? So legislation, as you probably, some of you may be aware, there are well-known legislations. So, for example, European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, India's Personal Data Protection Bill. So these are all some ways by which it can be legally, controlled and then ascertained. But there are still open problems. What are the costs of privacy intrusion? What are the costs of privacy protection? For example, I might want to protect my privacy. I can ask you this particular question. Do you want your privacy to be protected so that the cookies that, the cookie, the cookie is something, when you visit a website today, everybody asks, do you want to accept the cookie? What do you answer? Accept, right? Because if you say, no, I don't want to accept, then that particular website may not be available for you, right? So you might want to say that, yes, I want to accept, right? Now, if you accept, do you know what you are trading off, right? Is your what do you know what the cost of this privacy protection if you don't accept the cookie? So these are all hard problems, right? How do people value privacy and things like that? Now, on one hand, you might say that I am really a privacy, I really respect privacy. But you ask people who really respect privacy, what are the things that they are doing? It is quite possible that they might be writing their password on a notice board, right? Or they might be, they might not be knowing, right? That in a browser, Google browser, Chrome browser, or in your Edge browser, you can set a lot of privacy settings. They may not be even aware of the privacy settings. So their attitudes and actions can be totally different. If attitude-wise, they may say that they are experts, they really want privacy, but actually they may not do anything in order to protect their privacy, right? So these are all dichotomies in privacy attitudes and behavior aspects. Who should protect your privacy? You yourself are responsible for protecting your privacy. We have been protecting, some aspects of our privacy for a long time, right? Should we continue to do that? Or should we do it through technology? Or should we do it through government, through regulation? Or should it be left to the markets, right? So that it self-regulates and the market plays out its part. So these are all open problems. We still are struggling with answers, clear answers for this particular problem. Now, another important aspect of the privacy is, as I have told you, incomplete information, bounded rationality, right? We are all human beings. We calculate, compare things which are easier, right? If you show me, two brands of chocolates, right? Amul and, for example, 5-star, then I will be able to estimate what the price of these two, what the cost of these two are, and therefore make an informed decision. But if you tell me that if you give this information, then I will be able to, pay you something. Will you be able to tell what is your expectation in terms of sharing your personal information? What are you expecting to receive? Very, very limited, because we have bounded rationality, and therefore it is very difficult for us to sort of come up with an answer like that. We also do hyperbolic discounting, which means that we do what is important today, right? Without considering the effects of what will happen 20 years from now. Information, as I told you, is basically non-perishable. The information that is collected by you, by a particular data fiduciary, can be used 10 years later, right? Against you. But you are not thinking about 10 years from now, you're talking about today. And therefore, you do a lot of discounting for future effects, right? And that's one of the reasons why, for example, we voluntarily give personal information without considering the consequences of it in the future, right? Okay. Now, consumer identification. I have to go a little bit fast. That I will skip. All of us know about Google making advertisements through sponsored search and things like that. Yeah. So, what is price discrimination? Discrimination is distinguish between customers to know what price they can charge and to whom, right? So when you have purchased something in Amazon, obviously the next time you visit, you see a lot of things, right? You see a lot of recommended books or recommended items. How did Amazon come to know about it? Because of your prior purchase history, right? They also know how much did you spend in purchasing the last item. And therefore, it uses that information in order to distinguish between customers, right? That's one of the important difference between digital advertisement and the advertisements that you see on TV, right? The advertisement that you see on TV, most of the times we don't see it. We actually mute it, right? Because it is for everyone, right? I can never really understand the advertisements about certain things, right? Soap, for example. The advertisements about soap does not make much sense to me at all, right? But it might make sense to some individuals. So India has about, roughly some 200 to 300 million households who have television, and therefore the broadcast that you see on the television is for everyone. It is not personalized. Whereas the digital advertisement that you see, when you do a Google search, is personalized for you and you only, right? So when I search, I will get some advertisement, but when you search, you will get a different advertisement, even for the same search term, like shoes, right? And that's the way in which the information is personalized, right? And that is the beauty, the technology beauty of digital advertising. But that also indicates that the company which is going to provide you with the personal advertisement knows a lot more about you. It is not about the general public at large. It knows exactly about you. And that is the reason why it is personalizing advertisement for you, right? And therefore, one of the main, important reasons why, for example, the data fiduciaries resort to this, information collection from you is that they can tailor the products and price for you. May be good for you, but at the same time, it is possible that this particular company may also use the information that you have provided in order to discriminate you, right? Maybe charge a higher price for you, right? It is all possible. But so this is the one which distinguishes digital advertisement from the mass advertisement, such as the advertisements that you see in a newspaper or the advertisement that you see on the cable television, right? And that's one of the reasons why, for example, but sometimes you might actually like it, right? So, for example, yeah, I think I have it somewhere. Amazon patented the one-click technology, right? One click, and you are directly taken to, for example, all your the products that you have put in the shopping cart. You will be able to just do one click, and you will be able to pay and get out, right? It is easier for you, but that one click has captured a lot of things about you, right? The information, including what are the products that you browsed and you did not buy, right? What are the products that you bought, right? What was the last price that you paid on the product, the same product? All these information are being used by cookies, right? So cookie is planted on your machine whenever you buy something, and it is used to track, the merchants actually track the buying behavior using cookies, right? So these are all the ways by which these are all the reasons why, for example, digital companies are interested in acquiring data about you, right? It is for their own monetization benefits, including personalized services. On one hand, you might say that personalized services are good for me, right? Because I am not sold anything and everything in the world. I am being sold the items in which I am interested in, and that's good for me. And therefore, if you believe that, then you want to share more information, right? So that it can be more and more personalized. Sometimes you will think that, for example, every time you must be bugged, right, to enter the password for a particular site, right? If you have an access limited site, then you have to enter the username and password. After 2 or 3 times, you will say that, you want to remember the username and password, click that, right? Once you click that, then there is a cookie which is planted, which contains your username and password. That's also known to the company that have implemented this particular cookie. The advantage that you have is next time you want to sign in, you don't have to figure out what your password is, because password is already there, right? So these are the reasons why, for example, some personalization may be good for you, but if too much personalization is done, then the company which has taken all this personal information has a huge power over you, market power over you. So there is a lot of literature which talks about cookie effect and things like that. I won't go into conditions, pricing, purchase history, and so on. So that's about direct marketing, right? It is about direct marketing. The personalized advertisements of products are tailored to your needs. Now, you also receive a lot of spam, right? On your emails, you receive spam calls. I'm not interested in insurance products, but I keep getting calls because sometime I must have bought of insurance from someone else, right? And the other company, which is a competitor, is going to sell me this. But this is a spam. This is not targeted, right? So, for example, I always get this flyer. All of you must be getting, in the newspaper, you have some thousands of chunks, inserts, right? I'm a pure vegetarian, but I always get this non-vegetarian menu on my with my newspaper. They know that I'm going to junk it, but this is mass spam, right? Now, how did they get to know this information? They must have, they know that I'm by Times of India or Economic Times, and therefore they insert that in the Economic Times and send it to me, even though it is not personalized, right? So non-personalized advertisement such as this is also important, and that is one of the aspects of phishing. Some of you must have learned about web spam, email spam, and things like that. Phishing. We get a lot of mails from company in Nigeria saying that you just pay like you have become a winner of this $1 million, and you just pay 10,000 rupees and you will get 1 million. Now, most of the times we ignore it. We know that it is a spam, but by crook and hook, one guy presses this and he is gone, right? You presses the particular place and you're automatically taken to a bank site and you pay 10,000 rupees, and then that 10,000 rupees, you will never get anything, not even 1 paisa back. In fact, most of the cyber forensic cases, especially in Bangalore, I'm talking about Bangalore, 90% of the cases are with respect to phishing, right? Where you get this unwanted mail, which is not targeted at you, it is sent to millions of users, but still you succumb to it because of the bounded rationality, as well as what you need now, right? If I get $1 million, yes, I can make a fortune out of it. Click that, and then pay 10,000 rupees, nothing much, and I am going to get $1 million. And that's the way in which people get deceived, right? So there is a whole aspect of spam economics. Why, for example, even though most of the people know that it is a spam, it still continues to happen, and people get robbed off millions of dollars using this unsolicited commercial email, right? So unsolicited marketing is also an intrusion of privacy because it induces you to do something, right? And it is very difficult to stop. Spam filters don't work properly, and so on and so on. So there is a whole literature which goes into the economics of spam, which is, I won't go into the details, economics of spam, which is untargeted marketing, right? So the first one we talked about is targeted marketing. The second one is untargeted. I have about 5 to 7 minutes. I'll try to finish it so that there is enough time for questions. So information markets and intermediaries. For example, most of these companies share information. Google, Facebook, WhatsApp said that WhatsApp might share it with the parent company called Facebook. And Google and MasterCard, they collaborated together in order to share information, so that when you make an offline purchase, right? Offline purchase using your MasterCard, that is, you go to the store, present your MasterCard and buy something, that information is shared with Google, so that Google will make it to provide you advertisement for online purchases, right? So that you can use Google Pay or whatever it is, or again MasterCard, in order to buy something on online stores such as Amazon and so on. So these two are linked, offline, online, they are merged because these companies called Google and MasterCard being your credit card company, is able to share it with Google being a search company, right? So this is sharing information. This is also a violation of privacy, right? Because you did not envision that, right? You did not envision that sharing would be possible. So yeah, so I'll just so there are a lot of methods being proposed. For example, when you share information with Google or Facebook or Amazon, can you say that these are the kinds of information that I want to share only with you and not with anyone else? This is the set of information that you can possibly share it with others, and so on and so on, right? So what is the rights that you have on your information? In fact, the recent legislations, including the General Data Protection Regulation, take a user-centric approach. User has the rights, right? User has the rights to all the data. So that they will be able to control, they will be able to say, they will be able to revoke permissions if they don't want it to be shared, and so on and so on, right? A right to be forgotten. If they think that they have to be forgotten from the world, then they should say so, and all the data companies which hold information about you should erase it from their memories, right? So these are all the property rights approach which have been progressed, to handle this particular thing. But is it possible that the national information marketplace can exist, and it's possible that people can buy like information, right, from across, much like you buy stocks or shares, right? Is it possible that such a marketplace can exist? About 20 years back, Ken Lorden proposed this. It has not come into place in any country, but these are all some things there to think about. And the last one, I think I'm almost there, 2-3 minutes, and then I will stop for questions. Multi-party privacy in online social network. What is multi-party privacy? See, when you take a photograph with your friends, it's not that you are there, but your friends, 4 or 5 of your friends are already there, right? So which means that this photograph is not owned by you. It is owned, it's co-owned by all the, all of your friends, right? 5 of you, 6 of you co-own, right? Now, what happens if you want to share it with your friends and one of the friends that are there in the picture does not feel comfortable about it? How do you handle this, right? You cannot really share it with others because you are not the sole owner. You co-own it with all the other 5 of your friends. And one of these friends may not be in a position to share, or may not be willing to share the photograph which they have taken along with you to others, right? So that is a problem. And that happens often in social media networks, right? So social media networks, we post pictures, right? Do we ask all our friends in the photograph whether you have, it's okay for me to share in my Facebook timeline? Have you asked them, right? Now, what happens if some of them say that, no, I don't want you to share it? How will you decide? So there's a whole aspect of multi-party privacy. Setting and enforcing privacy rules for the different parties who co-own the data. This is a major issue, and we have not solved it. For example, tagging. Once you tag and you want to untag, those kind of things you can do, but there is no clean method by which you can actually distribute property rights of a property which is co-owned and have sharing rights. Right? So so these are all the problems that Alice tags Bob's photos and shares Bob untags, however, it does not prevent Alice's friends to see, right? And therefore, these are all the problems with existing methods in social media. And we need to have some methods, technology, as well as economics and policy measures in order to make sure that we understand multi-party privacy, in which an information is co-owned by more than one person, right? So these are all some things that we need to talk about. So I rushed through it, but I hope that I gave you a brief glimpse of the information economics, privacy economics. You can always Scholar, Google, and then you can look through some of the literature in the area. So I want to basically let you ask questions, because there will be, I'm sure that there are a lot of questions. Either I or Ms. Usha Ramanathan can take that, depending upon the type of question. I'm not a legal person, so she can take that. If it is a legal question, I can take any other question. So that's where I would stop, Mandar.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Sridhar, for enlightening us and giving the talk on the economics of privacy, which is the topic of utmost importance in today's world, where we are facing with a lot of information, with technological enhancement, and also on the other side we have the issues with personal security. So before we move on to the session on question and answers, I would like to, sir, I would like to request you, can you please stop sharing your screen so that we can see yourself as well as the chair. Can you stop sharing?
So Sridhar might have a connectivity problem, I guess.
Okay. So, all right. So before, so I would like to invite Dr. Usha Ramanathan to give her remarks on the public lecture by Professor Sridhar.
Thank you. That was very useful, and I really hope the students got a taste of how complicated this whole situation is. I worked for a long time and I continue to work in the field of environment. And one of the most important principles in environmental law, and which is also there in climate change, is the principle connected with intergenerationality, the intergenerational. That is, we shouldn't do things that will completely destroy the lives of the next generation. And in the environment arena, we saw that that has happened. And so it's required a lot of work to even acknowledge this as a principle, that if we have a resource today, we don't use it all up and leave nothing for you. So I think in the context of technology and privacy, this is a principle that plainly needs to come in, that we must understand the intergenerational element in this. Today, we see a lot of young people just adopting technologies, not really knowing what the implications are. And by the time they know the implications, they're like, what's to be done now? And today, we don't realize what the problem is. So we say, okay, it's all right, we'll carry on with it. Nothing will happen. And we know by now, I mean, the other book that you might want to read is Edward Snowden's book called Permanent Record. He's incredible because he's a young person who saw what he did so early when he was so young. And his clarity is immense. And there is a lot, what he did was connected with privacy. And what he saw was, in the beginning, he only recognized that the government of the US was taking everybody's data and doing what they wanted with it, not really serving the purpose which they were using as an excuse for collecting all this data. Later, I think it dawned on him too that it's not only governments, it's also that there are companies that are catering to government like this. In India, the difference is that it is much more open. When Dr. Sridhar's talk was on, the idea that this is the idea of the non-personal data framework, non-personal, not being non-personal at all, saying that it may be personal data. In fact, a lot of it will be personal data, but it's already in the public domain. And it is, in any case, if it is anonymized, it's all right. So this way of distorting it so that it can be taken in somewhere else. You think about what it means when they say that you give your information for a particular purpose somewhere. And that information which has got gathered over time will convert, if I'm a cloth merchant and I'm collecting a lot of data about people who are coming in so that I tailor and give it back to them or whatever. If it reaches a certain threshold, the cloth merchant is also classified as a data business. And they have to start sharing all that openly. So we are in a very, very precarious place now where technology this business about technology has come through many phases. And when Dr. Sridhar was talking, I was thinking that it would be nice, Dr. Sridhar, if you could just go back a little bit and tell us what the .com bust was. And what was that Y2K thing? When I was reading Y2K, I said, I must find something that is the most authentic, most reliable. And I found National Geographic. And they end their little narrative on it saying, till today, people don't know whether there was a genuine problem or it was just a hoax. But we know that a lot of companies got rich on this. And that includes a lot of Indian companies. What is this about? And how do we therefore view technology? I was also thinking, Dr. Sridhar, when you were talking, that a lot of the things that you were mentioning, there are reflections of that in Social Dilemma, the Netflix film that has been made. And for those of you who have not watched it, you might find it interesting to watch it. Because what is fascinating in that is the techies who've worked within the companies have come out of what they were doing to say, oh my God, what did I do? It was a terrible thing to do. So it's like doing penance afterwards, coming out and doing penance. But then when you look at what is it that they did, one of them created the like button. And the like button has caused much more damage to the idea of privacy and much more damage in terms of control by companies than many other things. It's crazy. And when you ask them, what is the answer to this? How do we deal with this? They say, don't click on notifications. I mean, it seemed the weakest, saddest response to a thing like this that I've seen. So I think we really need, it's really good that GITAM has organized this lecture, because we need to know why we need to deal with this question. And I think that has got established in this talk very effective. One last thing, which is that I actually think, listening to you, and this is something I've been saying for some time, but you reinforced it, Dr. Sridhar, that it is time for us to start imagining the unimaginable. Which basically is, for instance, saying, I don't find social media doing the kind of good that people said it would do when Arab Spring happened. I find various forms of hate, various forms of negativities, various kinds of polarizations, various bubbles which are being formed, where people are not able to even meet across these bubbles, and surveillance as a norm, as a routine. All these are emerging through social media. Is it really so difficult to imagine a world without it? If there is something that is as damaging and destructive, is it okay to think about whether we can do without it? And I feel, I have a certain kind of experience to be able to say this, because I don't normally say this at talks, usually because people already know, but I don't possess a cell phone, and it's not killed me. In fact, I think it left my life a little rational and rich. I've lost nothing. The only thing that I have not lost, which is most significant, the one thing that I have not lost, which is most significant, is peace of mind. So just think about whether there is such a thing as imagining the unimaginable.
Thank you very much, Dr. Usha Ramanathan, for your remarks. And before we move on to the question and answer, I would like to know if Professor Sridhar would like to comment, if he has any comment or anything to add.
Yeah. So I lost it a little bit because my connectivity was a little bit unstable. Thanks, Usha Ramanathan, for giving a lot of inputs for me also to think about. So definitely, I mean, technology advances. For example, over a period of time, the general purpose technologies, such as electricity, steam engine, electricity, and then afterwards computers, have had both positive as well as negative effects on the general standard of living of humans, right? So, for example, in fact, that I witnessed the GPS, the global positioning system, in 2007 when I went to Finland, because Finland is a country where you cannot ask a person for direction because you cannot see a person. Right? The whole country has about 5 million people, right? So it is very difficult to find a person to find directions. And therefore I used GPS, right? Now I thought that India, GPS and maps will never work because you can always ask a guy next door. There are so many people around us and he will know the neighborhood much better than any other automated technologies. But in fact, we tend to use Google Maps more in India than anywhere else, because at least I use it, because the guy who is next door, who knows this particular area, might give a very roundabout way of reaching the destination, whereas Google Maps might take me to the through the correct route. So, I mean, what I'm trying to hint at is, of course, technologies have their own positives, and if it is not used properly, there can be negative ramifications, profound negative ramifications. And whether the other way to flip it around is that as users of technologies, should we also take a very cautious approach in using the technology? As Ms. Usha Ramanathan has correctly pointed out, the youngsters, do they addict themselves? For example, I see kids figuring out how to send messages on a mobile than playing. Right? We used to play cricket on the open field, on the streets, and that was enjoyable, much more enjoyable than sending messages. So all you kids have to really understand the limitations of technology, the negative implications of technology. Of course, technologies are useful; they have improved standard of living, over the last decades and centuries, and we should use it appropriately. That is my only comment.
Thank you once again. Thank you, Professor Sridhar, for this wonderful talk, and thank you, Professor Dr. Usha Ramanathan, for your concluding remarks on the public lecture. May I request Dr. Usha Ramanathan to give the concluding remarks?
Just two brief comments given what has been said. Two things that we need to contend with. One, that it is the state that makes law, not the people. The state acts as a sovereign on behalf of the people, and we hand over some of our sovereignty to the people. And then one of the most important things that we had said in the HYD case was that the Constitution is very clear that it is not about the rights of the state over a people, but it is about the limits of the power of the state over a people. So it's not about the power of the state over a people. So that's one thing to just stash away. The second thing is, I really think, when we are dealing with change at the magnitude and the speed with which we are dealing with it, two things are going to be very important. One is what has been our experience in other domains so far. Even if this is different, in terms of human behavior and human ambition, this is very similar to what went before. So we do need to understand histories of many of these movements and what has happened. And Kannabiran, who's one of our leading constitutional lawyers, he's no longer with us, but he's influenced many of us in our thinking a lot. He told us this, and this is an answer to you, Dr. Divya, that he said, the journey from being a slave to becoming a subject, and from being a subject to becoming a citizen is a very arduous and hard journey. And once you become a citizen, you can't therefore think that you will remain there, with that position uncontested. It is a job that we have to keep doing, which is why when they ask, what is it that you do? I mean, I get described in multiple ways. Most often I find as an activist, my academic credentials somehow don't seem to matter or doesn't impress people as much. But it's very important to say that our job is of active citizenship. Technology is demanding that of us more and more. If we are not to slip from being citizens to becoming subjects, and in this case, we may not slip from that to being slaves, but to becoming objects of certain exercises. So I just think maybe, a little bit of delving into theory and theoretical understanding and principles on the basis of which we will learn to think, and not only anecdotal and reactive ways of thinking.
Thank you both, Dr. Usha Ramanathan and Dr. Sridhar. With Dr. Madhavi to the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Mandar. Good evening, everybody. On behalf of GITAM School of Humanities and Social Sciences, I extend a hearty vote of thanks to Professor V. Sridhar from International Institute of Information Technology, Bombay. It is indeed a wonderful and thought-provoking session, sir. The theoretical and empirical research on the ongoing issues of economics of privacy, nuances and complexities involving the protection and sharing of individual information are of great interest and debate. Your inputs and analysis on complexities and challenges in the economics of privacy are of great relevance and need of the hour. Concepts such as digital spam, multi-party privacy did elaborate on the privacy issues. Thank you. We look forward to attending to your sessions in future too. I also thank Dr. Usha Ramanathan for leading the session and keeping the session move on. We keep note of all your remarks, ma'am. Thank you so much. On behalf of the school, I thank you for accepting our invitation and sparing your time. It is a pleasure to be associated with you. Thank you, audience, for your patient listening. We look forward to hearing to such wonderful sessions ahead. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. We'd like to close the session. Thank you, the audience, for the